And I wanted to stress the relationship between the mayor and the Board of Ed and all the city departments and the Board of Ed departments. It has habitually been the case that the city has treated the Board of Ed at a very long arm's length. And some mayors have been more involved and some less. And it seems that you need good guidance from the mayor as to what the mayor will support. During his 2-year term, if he's not supportive of what the Board of Ed is trying to accomplish, then the Board of Ed is in a bit of a quagmire. I know that our Board of Ed that we currently have has done a very good job over the past 2 years, and they've come up with an operating plan. That operating plan's been adopted, and you know, if you follow carefully, detail by detail, they have done good work. We can see that they have also tried to maintain good fiscal control, which is essential. The Board of Ed going forward, I think if it has the same leadership, and if we can maintain that leadership and the types of people that we have on now, even though some of the people may change, then I think we're also in for continuing that operating plan and making further progress. Key is stability. You can't have a new superintendent every couple of years. And when you do have a new superintendent every year, that means that the people underneath are going to change over, and you're going to have further and further problems getting the stability to make the progress we need. And therefore, I can't think of a better person right now than Mike Lyons to lead the board. I don't want to attack the mayor on the Board of Ed, but I do find some of his statements confusing, particularly when he went out to deal with the capital issues for the board. And you had the let's fix it approach to the schools, and you had the let's have new schools and deal with the overcrowding approach to the schools. And those two needed to be blended. It's not an either or. And I think we've seen progress made headed that direction. But initially the mayor seemed to have flipped away from building the new schools. Then he seemed to flip back again. So I'm not real sure where he is on the issues. I think we're talking about $170 million to get it all done. And $170 million is not easy to come by. We definitely need state support. State support is dwindling. Where you did have state support to the degree of about 25%, that dropped to about 22% recently. And the amount of coverage they handle. And if it keeps falling, the 170 will be very hard to develop. We could get there, but we'd have to stretch it out over time. With respect to development in the city, I mentioned more than once over the past year and a half that we have to be careful. Development for development's sake is not going to help the city. I mean, some folks talk about grand list growth. Well, grand list growth is definitely a good thing to have, but it's not necessarily what's going to solve our budgetary problems. And here's why. There's different types of elements in a grand list. And some generate a lot of revenue for what they are. Some generate very little revenue for what they are. If we stick with rental housing as the generator of our grand list, we're going to find ourselves coming up short, because when you take full families, we hope our families have kids, and those children need education. We keep adding to the population. I would think, to be fair to everyone and give them all an excellent education, we'd end up building new schools, more than we're planning on even now. So we have to look at the current plan and the plan going forward and make sure that we can handle the infrastructure. And the infrastructure isn't simply education, but it is everything. It is water treatment. It is runoff. It is telephones and computer access and everything that you take for granted at home because you're already connected. Beyond that, it is fire support. It is police. It is health department. It is all the other city services that we have. And if you add and add and add and add and don't increase the infrastructure support, I think you can see the city become, unless you think we are overprotected, you can see it become underprotected and not safe. I look at our police department, and I think it hasn't grown in a few years now, and I don't know what it's projected to do. That's probably up for debate. But I think if you keep looking at the additions, we have to increase the size of the police force. There isn't a way around that. And I think our voters have to know that safety is a major concern for the whole city. And all types of infrastructure provide that safety. The period of time when I was on the council with some of my fellow council members, such as Richard Bonifant, we asked the planning department and we asked the redevelopment agency to go into each of the projects and lay out for us exactly what new infrastructure would be needed. Now, I don't know if that process has continued on. I've seen some evidence of it in the DPW area, but I don't know if it's broadly done. And I think we got to make sure that that happens. I could go on and on and on, and I'm not going to do that. I want to make one last comment about people and the city and government. Obviously, these days, people are concerned that government may not be the best that it could be. And I think that depends on where you are and what you're doing. We have a lot of folks that have been in local government, and they haven't been paid, and they haven't tried to use their position to earn money, and they haven't tried to use their position to steal money, but they've been just straightforward, honest citizens helping where they could. And I think we're blessed in Norwalk to have a lot of people like that. We're also blessed having folks that are competent. We have men and women, minority and majority, who have done an excellent job, and I think will continue doing an excellent job. And I want to keep stressing that competency exists now. If you could say that, gee, I don't want any of the folks that have been appointed to continue to serve, I'm not going to take that position. I want a lot of the folks that have been appointed to continue to serve. They've done a good job. I want them to continue to do a good job. With that, I'll answer any questions that you may have in any area, but education was the topic of the day, so let's start with you.
You mentioned, I have a couple of questions. One, you mentioned that kind of divide between the Board of Ed and the rest of the city.
Yep.
So how would you fix that, or what is your plan?
Well, I had noticed how some other towns, and I kind of kept my mouth shut about it until I checked it out to make sure it was real, have multi-board disciplines get together in meetings. In other words, representative from Board A and Board B and Board C and Board D all get together either monthly or bi-monthly and discuss the major issues. So if we take the Board of Ed and make sure they sit down with the city, their key department heads, not all of them, but their key department heads, the city key department heads, and talk about funding for the Board of Ed, the processes that are coming up seasonally. You know, every time we hit the winter, we seem to reinvent how to plow the Board of Ed and make sure it's safe for the kids. I don't think we need to reinvent that. We just need to make sure everybody gets the word and understands the processes and the procedures. So we need good communication between DPW, Parks and Rec, or Recreation and Parks, and the Board of Ed, because they're all involved in all that seasonal cleaning. We also need to make sure that everybody understands when the Board of Ed has a major revision to its policies, that everybody in the city can chime in on what the effects of that are, and not just kind of blow it off as, well, I guess they're doing their thing. Keep in mind that the Board of Ed, if fully costed, is about 60% of the budget, just under. Now, if you just take the raw number from the Board of Ed, I think it's about 53%. Where am I coming up with the other 7%? There are the departments that I just mentioned to you that provide a lot of services to the Board of Ed, which in some of the other towns, that doesn't happen that way. Board of Ed does it all internally. So they're fully costed. If you look at their cost on a budget line, it's everything. In our budget line, we're missing some of that other. And I think that would go a long way to improve, because that also gets out to the public. So everybody gets informed. And I think a bi-monthly basis is probably enough. We do enough meetings already, but if you do it less than bi-monthly, you're not getting much leverage out of a meeting.
And you're supportive of the current facilities plan?
I am. Currently, last I saw the price tag for it was about $170 million.
There are obviously things that could stand in the way of that progressing. Most recently, there was a really close vote on the architects for the construction project, something like that. If it didn't pass, council could add a year to the project. How do you, I guess, remedy that if you support it?
Yeah, I'm very sensitive to those kind of issues because in, you remember the Waiting School update, it was just completed when it was first started. We had a few folks, very important, influential folks, that tried to kill the architect selection. And I mentioned to them, we're talking 3 to 5 years additional time to get that project going. So I'm very aware of the detriment that that is. I think, where's Mr. Bonifant? I think it passed though, did it not?
It did.
The architect?
Yeah, the architect passed by, I think, 1 vote.
Yeah, but it passed.
It passed.
It passed, all right, so we're moving ahead. And in the future, I think if we talk a little more between ourselves, and in this case, it would help a lot, so that everybody understands the pluses and minuses of the architect selection. There is no perfect architect out there. Cost is not the only determinant, but it is a big determinant. And I wouldn't want to see us throwing money away unless the additional money that we're paying that architect really bears out and the performance that that architect's had, particularly in the area of building schools. When we rebuilt the high school in Prime McMahon, we were very careful in the way we chose an architect, and we ended up picking a really good one, and it turned out well.
Given your concerns about infrastructure, would you support further multifamily housing development in Norwalk?
I don't want to go any further with housing development until I understand exactly what we have on the board, because I'm not sure I know exactly what it is.
Would you support extending the enterprise zone from South Norwalk northward to the Wall Street area?
I think I would, but again, I'd want to know more detail. I think it makes sense. I also think it makes sense to put a rail stop up there. And, you know, Gail Aviel had suggested a means of funding it, and I think we should pursue that.
Did you have a number in mind for increasing the police force?
I don't have a number in mind. We discussed it when the police interviewed me the other day, and they seem to be where I was, which is we want to take a good look at it before we commit to anything. They think there are efficiencies available that we have not looked at yet.
Would you carry on what Mayor Rowling's done, have a mayoral assistant?
Well, I've said in the past a few things that people don't agree with in my party, and that is that I thought that Mayor Mosher was right when he thought a 4-year term was the best thing for the mayor, but I couldn't commit as a council person to 4 years for the council. And so when he brought it up to us, who were then on the council, I said I wouldn't vote for it as long as you marry the two together. And I think most of the council members I know now say the same thing. So I still think the 4-year term makes sense. That settles in the mayor a little more, and he does a little less politicking and more mayoraling. I do think that a chief of staff has been in place from time to time. Sometimes they've worked for free. Sometimes it was another position that just shifted over and worked with the mayor's office for a period of time. I know that Esposito had a chief of staff early on in his administration. I know that the mayor, each mayor almost, has had some sort of assistant. I don't have a big issue with the current mayor having an assistant. I think you got to clear up what the function is, though. An assistant to the mayor implies they're an executive who could be tasked with just about anything because the mayor's busy and he can't handle that. A chief of staff says you have specific responsibilities to coordinate the heads of staff of the various departments. To me, that's enormously different job roles. Chief of staff, I think, could help the mayor quite a bit because he would stay constantly in contact, if not daily, a couple times a week, and make sure that he's meeting with, and all I'm doing is repeating things I knew that happened in the past, and he's meeting with the department heads, and he's smoothing out the difficulties that arise between the departments.
Do you support the Sona collection as it's...
Excuse me?
The Sona collection?
What about it?
Do you support it?
I don't know why we wouldn't support it. No. Here's what I didn't support. I had a developer come up to me at a party, and he whispered in my ear. He's a current developer, so I'm not going to name him. And he said, you know, we can't get money for anything but rental apartments. And so we'd like to convert the entirety of the development of the area below the highway to rental apartments. Could you go along with that? And I turned to him and said, a few swear words, and he implied, no, I'm not going along with that. I mean, we built infrastructure there to support it, and we're just going to go in and pile in rental apartments in that particular location where we decided that would be a good location to have retail, offices, and other major support, whether it was hotels or theaters or conference centers. These things would fit there quite well, and I still go with that.
Were you talking about the 95-7 property?
Well, it's even more than the 95.7, and you're going to see evidence of that in the not too distant future, because there's more than one developer that has that same idea.
Yeah.
Let's just keep doing rental, because I can borrow money and I can build rental.
Well, that was another question I had, was how do you deal with that? If you don't want all this apartment building, but they're saying that's the only thing they can get money for, how do you?
Well, I think we lead the developers there and tell them, go for it. And I don't want to say that I'm anti-development. I'm more that I want the development to be understood to be beneficial to the city. And if it's not beneficial to the city, then I don't want us to support it. Now, we can't ban all development. That's really not the function of the government of this city or any other city. But we can certainly curtail it, and we don't have to support it, and we don't have to fund it. I'm particularly struck by property sales between one developer and another. The developer comes in, he comes to common council, he cries, oh my, I can't get anything done, I can't borrow any money. Oh my, but I'm going to sell it to this developer. And sure enough, that developer buys it. Well, little do we know that developer's going to buy it for $35 million. This guy bought it for $3.5 million. Even if he held it over time and had to pay interest on bonds, look, he's making a killing. And who put him in that position? The city. How did we do it? We built the infrastructure. We made things wonderful. Or we have plans to build the infrastructure. I don't think we want to write contracts that let that kind of windfall come to a developer who's just trading with another developer.
Do you support the walk bridge design as proposed?
No.
Log stand?
No.
What design would you support?
Well, to me, the current design looks like German flak towers. If you've ever seen any World War II movies, they had these big, ugly metal towers that stuck way up in the sky, and then they had ack-ack guns at the top of them. Well, look at the two towers that are proposed for the new walk bridge. Ugly? Ugly? Oh my word. I mean, we're talking really bad news. I'm curious as to why we're so stuck with an opening bridge. There are property owners upriver, and they have rights to their property that involve it being navigable. I think there must be a way of settling that out, because we don't have a deep harbor, and particularly as you go past the walk bridge, so that we could help folks move their business, compensate them for their possible loss, and still have a bridge replacement that's under $500 million, rather than pushing up toward $1 billion with an opening bridge. I just, don't we find money a little bit running short these days, whether you're talking federal government, state government, or local government? And we don't want to be pouring money out when we don't have to. I also think it becomes a more stable bridge. It'll fail less because it's not opening and closing. Mechanical things break. And it also would be easier to maintain over longer periods. So if you wanted to put it on a 50-year replacement cycle, that would make sense. If it's opening and closing, I think we're going to have a heck of a time having a long replacement cycle on it.
So for clarity, you'd support replacing the bridge with a fixed
The fixed bridge and handling the property rights to the folks that are up channel from the bridge.
You don't see a future for a navigable river.
Well, yeah, up to the bridge. Our harbor is not terribly deep, but particularly when you go past the bridge, there's very little harbor there.
Okay.
That last section, I just don't see us maintaining it as being navigable. Yeah. And so right now we have some vendors for building materials and some other seafood that use barges that are pushed by tugboats, and they need the bridge to open. I think we need to come up with another solution.
How would you, at this point in the game,
Yeah.
how would you change course with the DOT? How would you work differently with them?
With the DOT?
Yeah.
I've
Given
talked.
the design is advanced.
Well, I've talked to them in the past, and it seemed to me that they're always pretty reasonable. We had talked about the the bridge over Washington Street and how to clean it up, repair it, renew it. And I said, you know, you're talking about they were talking about how slow it was to bring materials in and off the site, the bridge. I said, why don't we just use a bunch of flat cars? Some will have supplies, some will have equipment such as sandblasting equipment, some will have pressurized paint systems on them. And, you know, I'm sure that you guys can work this out so you can have a better engineering solution to accomplishing the update of the bridge. And they got the bridge done pretty fast, I thought. So I think they listen, I think they use their ingenuity, and sometimes you just have to prompt them a little bit. I think in this case we want to prompt them and also make sure that we have congressional support to make the change if we need to about the navigable length of the river.
In a press statement a week or two ago, you mentioned the importance of the infrastructure. What would be your priorities, I guess, locally here in Norwalk, roads and such, and then DOT projects?
Well, my first priority right now, I think you can drive through town pretty safely. I don't think we have tremendous issues about getting around town. We've done a pretty good job with bridge maintenance, and we have some state highways that are being handled right now by the state. So I don't think that's an urgent issue. What I do think is urgent is that we work on the schools, get the ones that need fixing up fixed up, and get our new ones built with some priority, get moving quickly. So that is my top priority, is the schools program, capital program.
There's been a lot of public statements about the Board of Ed getting along better with the city than it used to. Have you said you wanted a better relationship with the Board of Ed. Can you talk about it in that context? Have you heard that those public statements are incorrect, or what would you do differently?
What I see is some frustration at the Board of Ed. I think you'll see it in some of my clients' responses, that you think you're moving ahead with a program, and then you see signs that you're not going to be moving ahead with the program and that there isn't support there. I don't know how much of that is just because there's worries about the state budget levels and the impacts, and maybe possibly the failure of the state to improve educational cost sharing, and the potential for the state to keep reducing its aid to cities and education. That can be part of it. But at the same time, while the mayor, no matter who he or she is going to worry about that, you have to lay your plan out and then adjust your plan to suit. I mean, you can't come to a dead stop because you're getting threatened that you got financial turmoil like that. And we are a good city. We've been AAA for a long time. You've had several mayors involved in maintaining that AAA. That means our borrowing costs have stayed quite low, and I would urge any mayor to try to maintain that. Now, it might happen that the state shorts us so much that we'd find it difficult to do, but we'll pay heavily if we can't maintain it. We should try very hard.
Oh, have you got an opinion about the status of the parking lot next to the library?
No, I'm totally confused about that. I mean, we had what seemed to me a deplorable deal where, once again, because the authorization was given to the developer, suddenly what he holds is worth a lot more than what it was when he first bought it. And the city, who should have intervened at the very front end of that thing, dealing with the parking issue at the library, comes in the tail end of it and says, okay, we would like to jump on board now. Boy, we really do need parking. And oh, by the way, we're going to pay a great premium for it. And then all of a sudden things come to a halt. And you know why? I don't know why. Only thing that I have seen is that the lawyers don't agree. So I would like to see everything pushed back a little bit there, and maybe a good talk about how we can mutually benefit.